Hello, welcome to Prerona Television Canada on behalf of Global Academy of Holistic Leadership and Coaching. We are very glad that we are continuing our leadership speaker series, and today is our episode 53. Uh, and today's our topic is leadership and conflict resolution. And our regular speaker and trainer, Advocate Jiaur Rahman, is with us, and he is the CEO of IITM and adjunct faculty of Independent University, Bangladesh. We are very happy. We're continuing one of the important topic today. And I hope that Advocate Jiaur Rahman will share his experience as he has corporate and education academic experience. So we'll be enriched by his presentations. Now I welcome Advocate Jiaur Rahman to continue his presentation. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me, Edward Probimondol?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
And I
thank you very much.
can see the
Yes.
screen also. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening in Canada and good morning in Bangladesh and rest of the world. We have been doing this session for quite some time, and today's session is on leadership and conflict resolution. So normally I start off with a number of normally I start off with a number of quotations, and I think you can see my screen in full screen mode. Okay, so let me start off with this quotation. It is by Esther Harding. Conflict is the beginning of consciousness. This is an interesting quote because it tells us very clearly that once you are conscious about yourself and your surroundings and what you're doing, then you start to realize that there could be some conflicts that may arouse with you, with people around you. So having a good consciousness allows us to understand the conflicting issues that are prevalent around us. If you are a person with very low emotional quotient or very low intelligence, sometimes you will not know what are the issues that are creating conflict around you. So at that point you can't be conscious about how to respond to the audience around you. So being conscious is very important. As a leader, we have to be conscious about our environment and how we are interacting with that environment. If our interaction is not up to the mark, in the sense that we are creating some kind of pressure points, some kind of distress, some kind of uneasiness in the environment, then you have put in some elements of conflict, and conflict will rise. So we will go into detail of why conflicts arise, but what is conflict we will go into afterwards in a definition. But in a very plain vanilla concept, conflict is something which is created due to your viewpoint and somebody else's viewpoint not tallying up together. So conflict can arise because of that. Moving forward, it's by Wayne Dyer. This person says, conflict cannot survive without your participation. This is very interesting. The word is on participation. How can conflict be there if you don't participate? That's the plain vanilla logic. You can't be in a conflict when the other person is, let's say, screaming at the loudest voice against you, but you are being calm and you're not paying attention to that person, in the sense that you're not disrespecting that person, but you're not responding. So the other part of a conflict where you must have more than one party, let's say you are the second party and you're not participating in any of the issues that are being raised against you, so you are actually not allowing the other person to engage in any debacle, engage in any word fight, etc., or any fist fight, or any other kind of verbal fight between you and that person, because you're not participating. So the leader has to realize that at certain times that you can de-escalate a conflicting situation by not responding. So sometimes we say that it's better to be quiet and absorb, and things will change ultimately, because maybe you are not at fault in a particular situation, and maybe the other person has this preconceived notion that it is because of you this, that, and that has happened, whereas that person may not have adequate information available to come up with that allegation against you. So if you remain quiet, and if you let that person uh, just speak, and then let go of his or her frustration, and afterwards, if you don't participate in that particular discussion, but if you say that we have heard your issues, but I was not involved in this process, and I'll give you some clues as to why I was not involved. And if that person has been sufficiently calm by that time, after expressing his or her frustration with you or a particular situation, then rationality probably will kick in the mind of that person, and that person would probably listen to you more carefully at that point, without having a very strong urge to just speak up against everything that you are going to say. That person will have a more receptive brain at that point. So it will be very helpful for you to actually navigate through the situation at that point. So you have to realize that participation breeds some kind of elements. It brings in elements where you can actually get into conflict. And if you notice in life, you have seen people having conflicting statements amongst each other, and then it flares up, and it comes out to be a very nasty discussion, not a discussion, it becomes a nasty verbal exchange, and cursing each other, and then the situation can go extremely tense between two or more people. And it could have started with some friendly poking between one another. So as a leader, you have to be always on the guard as not to position yourself in such a position through which you actually allow the conflict to flare up. It's best to be a non-participative agent at certain times. And we know in life that sometimes silence is more powerful than coming out and blurting out statements against the other person. Because if you are in an angry mode yourself as a leader, let's say you speak out certain unpleasant words, is there any possibility of taking those words back? Absolutely not. So you have to be very careful as to what types of word you're using, what type of statements, and you have to be absolutely on the guard not to use any abusive words. A leader should never use abusive or slang words, or which statements can be derogatory or inflammatory against somebody else, or deriding someone, ridiculing someone. Those are not the forte, not the scope of any leader. So if you want to lead in society in the capacity in which you are, you have to have a frame of reference where certain words, certain thoughts should not be at all coming out from your mouth. So you have to be careful as not to proceed in any direction where you see that there could be possibility of disunity, disharmony, depression, dejection, and ultimately a fight can result. So you don't want to walk in those directions. You have to be careful as to navigate out of those situations by offering opportunities for some kind of resolution meaning coming to a point of view where both parties can gain something out of it and be happy and leave the table of conflict, leave the table with the proper negotiation that may take place between you and the other party or parties. Moving forward, this is by Tenzin Gyatso. This person says dialogue is the most effective way to resolving conflict. I am 100% with this philosophy. I believe that every single situation can be overcome by having a proper discussion, having an intelligent conversation with the other person or other parties. Why? Because at any given point, even if somebody is really excited, agitated, and blurting out maybe unpleasant words and accusing you, if you are in a level-headed situation, and if you step in with a logic of building rapport and then analyzing the situation and then coming up with a proper perspective as to what really needs to be done in this situation, and focus on a solution rather than focus on the problem and get yourself embroiled in the discussion of the problem, but rather if you could navigate the discussion towards a dialogue and an outcome, then ultimately the conflict can be resolved. So this is the challenge of every human being. As a leader, we are faced on a daily basis, uh, where we see that you are being pulled into some kind of issue where you feel that your participation can create even more disharmony. So what needs to be done is to refocus and rechannelize your energy into a dialogue driven mode, saying that, look, if we can discuss this matter till eternity and nothing can come out, but let's look at it from the issue based point of view. What is the issue that is at play here? What is going wrong and why is it going wrong? If you can go into the root cause of the conflict, then addressing the root cause can actually drive a particular set of solutions forward for you. So Tenzin Gyatso speaks about dialogue, and we also as leader, we need to speak of dialogue in every single sphere through which we can overcome any conflicting situation. We see conflicts arising between parties or negotiations, between friends, between relatives, between family situation, spouse and your wife or your husband. These type of environment, you have all these types of conflicts. So we can start realizing that dialogue is the way forward. Sometimes you might have to put things off for a day or two or a few minutes or a few hours, because if you try to go into a dialogue, you're you are boiling with some kind of anger. You have a high pressure, in the sense your mind is not in the right frame of reference. So at that point, if you initiate a dialogue, it may not result in the most optimum output. So sometimes you have to sort of tell the conflicting people, like, look, if we discuss this matter in the next 10, 20, 30 minutes, we will have more frustration popping up. So rather, let's go home, or let's stop the discussion, come back in 20, 30 minutes or the next day with our reason, logical reason, and then discuss it further. So people might tell you to continue on with the discussion, but sometimes if you are in a leadership position, you can always ensure that the conflict is reduced in its strength by saying that, look, no use going into discussion today, let's discuss it tomorrow. And that way we can develop a logical approach to this situation. So this is very important, that we must ensure time and give some opportunity for our minds to cool down and then move into some form of discussion and dialogue. Moving forward, Lynn Johnson, an apology is the super glue of life. It can repair just about anything. Lovely words, super glue. So if there is an issue that is you are facing with, and you feel that you had some component of misdemeanor, let's say, or some component of not being proper in your conversation, and you were little slanting, or you had raised your voice or you did not speak in the proper fashion, then the best thing is to add a little apology to the conversation, saying that, look, on such and such day, or maybe a little while ago, I was a little inflamed and I actually said a few things which I should not have said. So please, I beg your apology, and can we proceed? That can actually reduce the animosity, reduce the frustration between you and that person or that person's, those persons. So this is a super glue. So if we can use this super glue in our lives on a regular basis, then I think much of the problems of the world can be solved. So it's ego that drives us, and we had done a lot of discussion on ego and our super ego and our id. So I don't want to go into those direction, but I can just simply suggest that from a psychological point of view, if we can use this glue at different times, then you could actually create the rich fabric of dialogue back again, if, even from a situation where you were not facing each other and you were in a very belligerent mode. So you don't want to get into a point as a leader where there is no point of return. An apology is an avenue to create that point of return. So Lynn Johnston is rightfully suggesting that let's use this glue of life in our everyday activities and use this terminology, use this practice of apology on a regular basis. But this does not mean to say that you will be making mistakes left and right all day long and you will build your conversation back again by apologizing. It can work at certain times, but if you're making the same trail of mistakes over and over again, then the strength of apology falls and people will not resonate back with you. They will say that you're too quick to get angry, and then you're too quick to offer an apology. So apologies are no longer accepted. So as a leader, you have to realize and you have to embed this culture that first and foremost, we should not be in a position to create an environment where apology is needed. That's point number one. The second point is that you have to use apology sparingly. Can't be darting off apology left and right. So that way, the strength of apology is significant. Otherwise, the value of apology is of no consequence, and people will not pay any heed to your apology. So you have to realize how often you use this word apology. It should not be misused. It should not be overused. So that's something that you have to pay attention to. But as a leader, we must wear this hat of responsibility that if there has been some form of bad situation that had been created due to your own particular perspective or your thought process or your communication, you have the element, you have the tool of rectification, and which is apology. So use it, but use it sparingly. Moving forward, normally I have my own definition of leadership, and today I've come up with a new definition of leadership, focusing on this issue that we have been discussing throughout this session. So leadership is about working through conflict to arrive at a safer shore, inviting sensible dialogues and discussions. The crux of the matter here is sensible dialogues and discussion. That's when leadership takes place. We will have conflict in life. We are no prophets that we will overcome every single issue ourselves, and we are so fine human beings that no conflict will ever arise. That is a that is a utopian situation, and I'm sure no one is in utopia any time of the day. So we will have conflicts. That's a rational, logical perspective to have, but we shall overcome conflict through our leadership qualities of superior dialogue, sensible dialogue, and extensive discussions. So discussions and dialogue frame things forward. Once you get a discussion going and you create an opportunity for dialogue. You let the other person see your point of view. And similarly, when you open a floor for discussion, you get to see the other person's point of view as well. So that allows you to create a situation of harmony. So the conflict is driven out by building harmony in your presentation, building harmony in your communication. And that's how you actually strengthen your own capacity to lead in the nation or lead in your organization. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you use these two terms, dialogues and discussions, in the most profound manner. If you are logical in your dialogue, and if you are driven by point of a particular point of in contention that needs to be solved through your discussion, then ultimately logic will prevail. Ultimately, the other person will see and sense that you are trying to build some kind of rapport back into a frayed situation, and leadership is going to be strengthened on your side, and people will start realizing that yes, this person may have had some issues, but he or she was also very responsibly driving the dialogues and discussions so that an amicable settlement can be arrived at. So, as a leader, our primary focus is to actually build this amicable settlement kind of environment, and then blending in logic and proper issue, we can move forward and create a harmonious environment and lead your division, lead your society, or lead the country in which you are taking political leadership forward. Moving forward, conflict and conflict resolution. We actually had been talking about conflict all this time, but here is a definition. I could have used it earlier, but since we know the term conflict uh, quite easily, it comes to us, and it's not a very difficult notion. We are exposed to the idea of conflict from an early age, so it's easy to understand. So I'm giving you an academic definition of what conflict and how conflict resolution can be arrived, can be overcome. Conflict is a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted one that continues on for a certain period of time, or be incompatible or at variance, a clash. That means you have a particular viewpoint, the other party is not seeing your viewpoint and has a different viewpoint, and they are at a different direction. So you are thinking of going and doing a particular work in a certain fashion. The other person is telling you that no, your direction is wrong, you are moving in the wrong direction, and you will have a very negative consequence, so you need to follow my path and my way of doing things. So it can create an issue of incompatibility and variance between the thought process. So this can set the tone of frustration, and clash can take place. So arguments, disagreements, etc., would be the order of day in a conflict ridden environment. So when you are thinking of being productive in your work environment, you have to have an absence of conflict, a presence of harmony. Absence of conflict is harmony. So any organization which has an harmonious environment, that organization will be more productive, because the energy and the capacity and the motive of this organization and the people and their will would be reflected most positively in driving their day-to-day activities, in driving their activities so that they are synchronized in going towards the grand vision that they had set out. So everybody will be working in a proper and synchronous fashion, so that activities will be accelerated and ultimately a harmonious environment will result. So going into conflict will be the exact opposite, and you will be dwelling with inaction. In inaction due to improper attitude, improper behavior, would result in further frustration. So you don't want to be in that kind of environment. So how do you resolve this situation of conflict or clash or argument? You are looking at the particular mitigation strategy, ways to reduce the conflict. It is ways to mitigate the conflict and bring peace and reduce tension so that contesting party can work together. At the end of the day, it's all about coming back to rational mindset so that you can actually work together. If you are always in a bickering mode between you and your colleagues in the workspace, then things will not work. So you have to be careful as not to create any kind of situation where you are the reason for the conflict. It's best to mitigate, it's best to discuss it out, it's best to, even as I mentioned previously, offer an apology and move on with the work activity that has been slated for you. And that's how an organization actually moves forward. An organization which is embedded in conflict, you will have internal politics, and then ultimately you may not see eye to eye, but things will not work as you had planned, because your activities is not just driven by your own personal activities. You are connected in an enterprise with others, and others' decisions are also equally important for you to move and proceed in the right direction. So others will not cooperate with you. They will not be in a collaborative mode, and maybe they may not show you their frustration, but there might be an underlying current which can create a stress between the organization, within the organization. So you have to be careful as not to create any kind of opportunity where you can build a conflicting environment. And conflicting environment surely will create a point of frustration, which will reduce the quality of work, and also will create an environment where people will not be feeling challenged, motivated, incentive driven to do their best work. So that is not good, and ultimately overall outcome of the organization will be negative. So that will create an organization, that will build an organization which is based on a wrong philosophy. So reducing conflict through proper peace building exercises should be the order of the day, and every organization should try and figure out through their brainstorming sessions per se, an open day session where people can actually come and discuss on matters and try to solve things rather than flare things up. So if there are moments where you wanted to say something in a proper earnest and try to solve certain things, but since we are human beings, one conversation led to the other, and instead of reducing the conflict, you had opened up the Pandora's box, and more conflict had risen, more negative statements have been placed right in front of you in a position where you really wanted to reduce the conflict. So it kind of boomeranged on you. What do you do in those kind of situations? That's a very difficult question to answer. But as a human being, you have to be careful as not to let your communication falter. You have to be on guard of what you're saying on a regular basis, and that's how you can actually l- close the uh, the opportunity for the conflict to grow. You can sort of have a very small window through which the issue of conflict can flare up. So you have to be always on the guard. So that's very important. So conflicts will be there. Every organization will have conflict, but resolution is the order of the game. If you are good at resolution, then things will be properly understood in the right context, and a fair and equitable outcome will come about. So you have to be focusing in those direction as a leader. Moving forward, managing conflict, we had talked about it, so I'll just quickly go through it. You promote dialogue. You are always out there discussing the matters so that people come up with their perspective. So one person gets to know what was the reason for the other person to say a certain make a certain statement, and that can sort of soften the situation. Focus on win-win scenario. You want to build a harmony within your negotiation, so a win-win scenario has to be promoted to reduce the conflict. So you have to give in at certain points. You have to allow others to also get some benefit out of the discussion. So you give in, the other person gives in. So both parties have to be in a mindset to give in a bit, and then you gain some. There are people in this world who are extremely selfish, and they try to get things that they feel right, and they try to gain as much benefit out of any negotiations. Normally, these people ultimately do not do well, because life is a combination of give and take. So you will never win in all your negotiations. So sometimes you may fail miserably because you don't have that mindset of synergy. You don't have that mindset of dialogue. You had always been very selfish. So those of you who have that type of characteristics, these are ingrained between yourselves. You should reflect back on your own personal traits, behavioral traits, and try to alter your human behavior so that you create an opportunity for win-win. Because at the end of the day, people are well liked by other people who are more logical, who tries to build a rapport by giving in at times. I am not suggesting that you should be giving in all the time. That way you will become a weak person. People will overtake you, and people will try to misuse you, that's for sure. But if you are holding your position and giving in when it's truly needed, will create a good character, and it will create a good set of example of leadership through you. So you want to build an environment and an attitude, a frame of reference where you will give in at times, but you will also hold on to certain points which are important for you or your organization. So creating a win-win environment would be very much needed for reducing conflict. Avoid being judgmental. Many people judge others. We don't try to listen to things. We jump into conclusion, and jumping into conclusion is nothing but being judgmental. So you don't want to be judgmental. A leader has to listen to different viewpoints. You can't lead unless you are open to discussion. You can't lead unless you try to gain the other person's perspective, and logically then arrive at a solution which should be driven by equity and the fairness principle. So the golden rule of being fair at all times would actually build the leadership momentum. So if you are managing conflicts on a regular basis, no other person will lead in your organization, in your society, but you, because people will feel at ease around you, and people will think that you are the right person to lead and solve the problem. So if you're a chieftain, assuming you're in a tribe, and if you are fair at all times, there will be less conflict, because all the conflicting situation will brought to your attention, and you will be able to amicably solve these situations. So logical reasoning is the order of the day. So at the end, I would suggest that every situation can be handled effectively if you are being fair and logical. So conflicts can easily be solved, may not be easily solved, because if it's being pestering and brewing over decades or over months, then you can't just solve it in one fine day. But you could arrive at certain issues and arrive at certain points through which the conflict can slowly simmer down. So that's very important. Simmering it down and slowly reducing the tension level within the conflicting parties can ultimately create an environment where the conflict will no longer be there, and the two or three parties can be made friends back again. And imagine if you are the parties, or the both parties are back into a friendly gesture, the element of fear will not be there, element of frustration, element of despair and depravity will not be there. People will work together in one strong community, output and outcome will be sufficiently more. So that's how we reduce conflicts. Any nation which has conflict within itself due to political viewpoint can never work as one nation. So every nation and every politician within a nation should strive to reduce their internal conflict so that the country proceeds as one body and one element. And that's how a strong nation is designed and developed. And if you look into the history of good nations, you will see that they have been able to find ways to reduce their conflict. There will be conflict because in a democracy, people will have differing points of view. But if you are good with rational reasoning and positioning in your logic, then ultimately things can go effectively well in your direction. So moving forward, leadership and logic. We had talked about conflict. So leadership is all about building the logic of not getting into any kind of conflicting environment. So it strengthens your possibility with logic. Leadership is definitely strengthened by your logical frame of reference. That means you're logically arriving at every issue and every discussion. The central tenet is logic. So it strengthens your possibility as a leader. It builds partnership. If you're logical, people will resonate. People will feel that, okay, these are the kind of people with whom we want to work. These are the friends that we want to choose because they understand the total game and they want to be a team player. So builds partnership. Leadership and logic builds partnership. It introduces the spirit of innovation. If you are confined in an environment and people are not listening to you, even if you are a very creative person, even if you have all the knowledge in the world, somehow you will not be spirited. Somehow your energy to innovate, create something new will not be there. Even if you want to, it will not be there because of the human element. It's very hard to control our own mindsets. You know that at certain times and certain days you feel that you're not feeling well because you feel grumpy. Why? Maybe something had happened a few days back that had affected you, but you're not being able to identify where that problem situation is. You are groping with other issues and you're thinking maybe something that you spoke yesterday is making you feel uneasy and frustrated, but you really don't know. It is a situation that has arisen due to a set of consequences. So when you are in that type of environment, innovation and creativity will not be there. So you have to be very careful as to introduce logic every single time in your leadership design and if your leadership practice. Once you're logical, you will always be taking new initiative and they will be risk-taking initiative, but they will be inspired by your logic. So you will proceed forward with the right type of mindset. Synergy will take place when leadership and logic are combined. Your leadership quality and your ability to see through the opportunity set will create a synergistic environment, and 2 plus 2 will actually result in 5 rather than returning a value of 4. When two people really work together individually, the output that they produce would be more than the group output that they produce would be more than their individual set of output. Imagine you are in a machine, you are working with a machine. Individually, you are having a lot of difficulty running the machine yourself because it might take more than two people to operate. But if you're working with two people and you are in a synergistic environment due to working together, you produced six outputs, assuming, but when you're working in as a team, you may produce more than 12 outputs. Individually you had produced six outputs, but now you may produce more than 12 outputs because your efficiency has increased. Maybe the activity level has tremendously kicked in. So outcome will automatically be better, and your energy will be better applied at that point. You will not be draining your complete energy towards the end of the day. It will still be there at an optimum level, so you continue to produce the right output level. So these are important issues in leadership. And if you're a logical person and you have to inculcate logic at every level within your organization, so this is a cultural perspective that you have to imbue in your environment, and that's how you build a rich fabric of a organization, and leadership will evolve. So coming back to probably my last session question, normally I finish off with a $1 million question, and today's $1 million question is: do you use your own staff at conflict resolution, or invite other conflict resolution experts? So the point is, do you try to solve your conflict internally, or do you bring external resource person to uh, solve the situation that has taken place? Honestly, it all depends. If it's a conflict that can be solved by your team member, if you have very rational people, very logical people to whom people respond and to whom people have complete faith in, then there's no need to bring in additional external expert. But if the situation has gone out of your way, it's no longer manageable, and you know that even if you bring your people together, there it can turn into something even worse and go into a fist fight or whatnot. You don't want to take that kind of risk. So at that point in time, sometimes you might want to bring in third party mediator, arbitrator, etc. And that's another way of actually resolving an issue. And any negotiation in any conflicting situation, there are scope of third party engagements. Normally it happens through in a trade body. If there are conflicts, they bring in their own set of set of solicitors or advocates or lawyers, or their own set of people who have a subject matter expertise, and they will negotiate on behalf of the parties. And that way the parties are sort of outside the negotiation process, because they have gotten into a frayed kind of relationship and they can't settle the differences. So the each party brings the other party a new set of parties, and they are not in a very difficult kind of environment, because yes, they might be resolving a conflicting situation. Each party will have their own viewpoint, fine, but they have not fought between each other. They are just going to come in as professionals to solve the problem. So their mindset would be more fresh, and they might bring in an outcome quickly. So the answer to this question is, it all depends on what type of environment, what type of situation you're in. And if you are in a very deep and desperate situation, by all means, you might want to bring in an external set of experts. Please note that when you bring in external set of experts, your cost may rise. Whereas if you have your own internal people, the cost may not be as high. Of course, whenever you are in a negotiating mode between two parties, between your own organization, your costs are rolling, because they are in a negotiating table and they're not doing their actual productive work, but they are in a negotiating table trying to solve things. So your cost is still there, but it will not be as acute as bringing an external resource person. So it depends on whether you can solve the conflict quickly by your people, then by all means use your people. If that conflict cannot be solved by your people, then the suggested guideline is to take benefit from the outside and bring in the experts and try to solve. And if that doesn't work, then you always have the recourse to go through the judicial process. But that's a long drawn process. Nobody recommends those, because it will add even further costs, and it may even cause more enmity between conflicting parties. So with that, I would like to end today's session. I'm Professor Advocate Ziorman. from Dhaka. I'm the CEO of IITM. And back to you, and we welcome you to our series that will take place next week, same time, from Canada and from Bangladesh. Thank you very much. Back to you, Edward Probir Mondal.
All right, thank you very much, Advocate Gio Rahman, for your presentation, leadership and conflict resolutions. Today we learn a lot of things about how leadership is related to conflict resolution and what will be the leadership role during this conflict. So with that, I'd like to again thank you, Advocate Gio Rahman, and I would like to welcome you for attending our next session, which will be held same time. It is in Eastern Mountain Standard Time at 9 p.m. On Wednesday evening, and Eastern Standard Time at 11 p.m. Wednesday evening, and Bangladesh Standard Time at Thursday morning at 9 a.m. and Indian Standard Time on Thursday morning at 8:30 a.m. With that, thank you very much and stay safe and stay blessed.